On the night of Wednesday, June 22, 1938, the whole world was focused on Yankee Stadium. Joe Louis, nicknamed the Brown Bomber, was fighting a rematch with Max Schmeling, called Hitler's Superman. As Dave Margolick described in his book Beyond Glory, this was much more than a prize fight. Around the world, this was seen as a symbolic duel between democracy and fascism, freedom and slavery, white and black. Joe Louis Barrow was born a dirt poor sharecropper's son in Alabama in 1914. He was 12 when the family moved to Detroit, part of the great diaspora of Southern blacks to the industrial North in the 1920s. He started boxing in the Depression to bring in a dollar or two, billed simply as Joe Louis. He first came to New York in 1935 to box former champion Primo Carnera. No New Yorkers were more excited about Joe Louis coming to town than the 300,000 residents of Harlem. In 1935, they sorely needed something or someone to cheer about. Of all New York neighborhoods, the Depression had fallen hardest on Harlem. Unemployment had already been higher than in the rest of the city. The great majority of Black New Yorkers who had jobs worked as unskilled or semi-skilled laborers or in the service industries. 70% of the working women were domestics. Those who worked in industries such as the needle trades consistently earned less than white women working at the same jobs. The city government made some token efforts to hire qualified blacks, but the Irish-dominated police, for instance, systematically prevented black cops from advancing, and no black doctors or nurses were allowed to work in any public hospital in the city except Harlem Hospital. Blacks who tried to run their own businesses always struggled against white competitors. Only one Harlem business in 10 was black-owned. When the Depression hit, unemployment in Harlem rose to 25% in 1930 and steadily climbed to 50%. Anywhere blacks and whites worked together, blacks were fired first. Those who held on to their jobs saw their wages and hours cut. Average household incomes in the neighborhood dropped by almost half in the first 2 years of the Depression. All the problems the neighborhood had experienced before were now exacerbated: homelessness, malnutrition, petty crime, juvenile delinquency. By the start of 1935, Harlem seethed with resentment and anger. That March, it erupted. A Puerto Rican teen was caught shoplifting a cheap penknife in a five and dime on 125th Street. A minor scuffle ensued, but a rumor flashed around the neighborhood that the youth, now turned black, had been viciously beaten and or killed. Protesters from the Communist Youth League and a group called the Young Liberators gathered outside the store, attracting a sullen crowd. Someone smashed a window and a full-scale riot broke out. It went on all night as thousands of fed-up Harlemites raced up and down 125th Street, attacking and looting the white-owned shops. Mayor LaGuardia rushed 500 cops to the neighborhood. They made 1,000 arrests, and by 4 a.m. it was all over. LaGuardia blamed the communist protesters for causing it. Leaders in the neighborhood said the causes were extreme poverty and hopelessness. No one was surprised then when 2 months later Harlem greeted Joe Louis as an avenging hero. On the night of June 25th, 64,000 people crammed into Yankee Stadium to watch Louis knock the much larger Carnera down 3 times in the sixth round and finally for a TKO. There was pandemonium in the stadium. Nearby, all Harlem erupted again, this time to dance and sing in the streets until dawn. Louis and Schmeling first squared off in June 1936. Schmeling was a hero to the Nazis. New York promoters ballyhooed the fight as a duel between America's sepia Superman and Hitler's Ubermensch. With most sports writers predicting an easy Lewis win and Jews threatening to boycott, the crowd failed to fill up Yankee Stadium this time, though millions heard it on the radio. To the increasing dismay of Black Americans everywhere, the German pounded Lewis mercilessly for 11 long rounds and then knocked him down for good in the 12th. A few elderly Black listeners, including one in Harlem, reportedly fell dead of heart attacks beside their radios. Langston Hughes would remember walking down 7th Avenue and seeing grown men weeping like children. Meanwhile, it was the Yorkville neighborhood's turn to party in the streets. The large German community there marched arm in arm along 86th Street, singing and cheering. Schmeling flew back to Germany from Lakehurst Naval Air Station in New Jersey on the new Zeppelin Hindenburg. The Hindenburg was the pride of Nazi Germany, the largest commercial airship ever built, almost 3 football fields long. New Yorkers gaped from streets and windows as the immense silver lozenge with swastikas on its tail floated overhead to and from Lakehurst. For all its awe-inspiring size, the Hindenburg carried fewer than 100 passengers, who each paid more than $6,000 in today's currency to cross the Atlantic in 2 days, half the time it took an ocean liner. Zeppelins like the Hindenburg that were filled with hydrogen as opposed to helium were disastrously prone to explosive fires. When Schmeling returned to the United States in May 1937, he had originally planned to fly again on the Hindenburg, but scheduling required that he take an ocean liner instead. So he was not on board when the Hindenburg exploded on arrival at Lakehurst that May the 6th. When Lewis's rematch with Schmeling came to Yankee Stadium on the night of Wednesday, June 22nd, 1938, 70,000 people packed the place. Mayor LaGuardia was there, and J. Edgar Hoover with Clive Tolson, and Thomas Dewey, Cab Calloway, Vincent Astor, Tallulah Bankhead, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Hemingway, and Jack Johnson. Some 2,000 Germans had come over on the ocean liners Bremen and Europa, swastikas snapping from their masts. 60 million Americans, half the entire population, gathered around their radios. All over New York City, deserted streets echoed to the sounds of radios tuned to NBC, with announcer Clem McCarthy's gravelly voice rasping out of windows thrown open on a hot night. 20 million Germans listened to their own broadcast and another 20 million elsewhere around the globe, making it the largest audience for any event in the history of the world till then. The stadium crowd exploded in cheers as Lewis loped across the infield to the ring a few minutes before 10 p.m. Then Schmeling trudged out with a towel over his head for a little protection against the shower of cigarette butts and paper cups hurled at him. He was on his hands and knees when the referee ended the fight 2 minutes and 4 seconds after it began. It was over so quickly that some latecomers still filing into Yankee Stadium missed it. An unearthly roar shot up from the crowd and was echoed around the world. All Harlem, plus a couple 100,000 visitors, packed 7th Avenue from 116th Street all the way up to 145th. Amid the singing and dancing and banging of pie tins, many raised their arms in mocking Nazi salutes. The gloom in Yorkville was funereal.